Thank you for joining. My name is David Giorgiani, and I am the instructor for the Introduction to Software Engineering course at the University of Toronto. You're all here because we posted a call for proposals for the program that we have been running for the past few years. So this webinar is mostly for you to be introduced to the program, to see what is involved, and kind of give you a sense of what could be done. I will be recording this, and I'll post a link on the same document that you found this. So feel free to just listen in and just be mindful that the webinar will be recorded. So in case you have any questions, if you wanna share. So with that said, like I said, this program is mostly intended for the summer, but we've been running it for the past 2.5 years. I lost count of the rounds, but this will be like 5th or 6th round that we're running it every single time, every single term. It was improved based on the feedback from the partners and the results that we got. So far, we've got some good progress. Today, we will be talking about kind of introduction, a little bit more about the program, what it is, the kinds of projects that we're expecting to have for the students. I'll give you a bit of a timeline, a sense of a timeline of when the program will be starting and what is involved, what are the steps. We've laid it out on the document, but I'm happy to take in any questions about that as well. How the project starts, and then we could talk about the details of it there if you're interested in, and what happens at the end. This is probably we've learned the most important part of it. We want to make sure that the students deliver something that is useful for you and your organization at the end, and you're aware of what is involved in the whole process. So there's no surprises at the end of it, and you can take it on and do what you intended to do with the program, with the project. At any point, if you have any questions, feel free to post it in the chat or just speak up and kind of ask the questions. With that, let's get started. First thing, this is a course level initiative. This is part of the University of Toronto Department of Computer Science program, but is not official program run by the department. So this is something that we, the teaching team of the course, have taken on ourselves because the students in our project, in our course, work on practical skills of software development. And that involves mobile development, web application development, desktop application development. And their goal is to solve a problem for someone. And we've decided to extend this offer to the community so they can reach out and define the projects for the students so they can choose the one that they're interested in and work through. The timeline for it is 4 months. So this one specifically is through the summer. So it starts from the first week of May all the way through the last week of August. And again, we'll go through the timelines a bit more in depth. And I will be teaching the course, David Giorgiani. I'm a professional in this space, in the tech space in Toronto. I'm a product manager at a company called Ideal.com. And we build an artificial intelligence system to help in the recruiting space. That's something that I do professionally on this as my main role, and I'm teaching the students to be professional software engineers. So the quality of the project, based on what we've seen, is very high and helpful. We've made a call through several channels. So some of you may have come through CSI, some of you may have come through our personal networks and LinkedIn posts. Some of you may already be a previous partner in the previous terms. We've had several partners come back to continue working on the projects, and I may mention some of their names down the line as well. So let's talk about what the projects are. These are some of the partners that we've worked with in the past. Again, these are teams within these organizations. We don't have an official partnership with SickKids. We don't have an official partnership with Harvard Medical School. We have had teams that work in these organizations and needed to get something built. So for example, for SickKids, we built a mobile app. For Vector Institute, we built a web application and simulation engine, and several we have for Chalmers, we again built web applications, different kinds of things. Most of these are web applications. for various use cases. And what are we looking for? I've laid it out in the document that what we're looking for is something is more of an ad hoc and non-standard kind of functionality. What do I mean by standard? So for example, something like a content management system, like a blogging feature, community membership, and standard purchasing. All those things are standard functionalities of a software that other systems offer. So for example, many of the solutions that people would want would possibly be solved by something like a WordPress or like a learning management system, or there are so many other systems for it. Why do we recommend, why do we require not having a standard feature? Or it's mostly because we want to be able to give you something that you can't find for a much lower time and effort outside. And more importantly, you can get support for those things at the end. So I'm happy to kind of work through some of the examples that you may have in mind at the end of the webinar, so everyone understands whether this would fall under something that would qualify for the project, or whether it would be something that would be better suited for a standard, again, software that is out there already and doesn't need to be part of the project. Something that probably clear now is it needs to have an extensive software development component. We're not focused on machine learning. We're not focused on data science. We're not focused on hardware. It is mostly and solely focused on software development. It can have other components to it, but it cannot be. But the other parts cannot be the main part of the project. One thing that, again, depending on the technical level of the audience, may or may not be clear is that the students will build a software, they will write the code for it, but this code needs to be running somewhere. And that somewhere usually is a server. You may have heard of Amazon Web Services, you may have heard of Google Cloud or Microsoft Azure, and all these places where your code can be run if it's a web application. So the students will help you build those, the code and the application, but at the end, they're also going to be helping you deploy the code to one of the instances, or at least guide you to the next steps of where can you deploy this. Obviously, with coming that deployment to one of those, let's say, servers, means that you need to take ownership of managing the servers. You need to potentially pay for the software to keep the software running. And those are the aspects that we can talk about at the end of the webinar if you need to know more about them. And I think we've made it clear on the documentation, but after the 4 months is done, after the August is over, the students don't have any responsibility to kind of maintain and put in fixes for the software. Having said that, a lot of the times, two possible things happen. One, students become more engaged and interested in the project, and in a team of 5 or 6, there will be one student who volunteers to help and continue kind of working with the organization and make the product better. The second possibility is that if the partnership went well and you took your product or project to an extent where you want to continue, you can submit another proposal and have another team work on it. An example could be, we had an organization called Feeding Canadian Kids who joined and did a project with us in the fall. They took the product to a level that they were happy with, and they decided to continue the project to add more features to it and more details to it in the winter term. So they came back and continued working on the project. One thing that I want to clarify now that we're talking about ownership and maintenance is that we used to be able to sign NDAs as part of the course teaching team, but because of the recent changes to the U of T legal counsel and legal body and the guidelines, now that process is dramatically changed, and we are asked to kind of go through the process, which involves potentially the chair or some other officials in the department to sign those NDAs, which practically means that it will take a much longer time to sign the NDAs. In the past few terms, we haven't signed NDAs with the partners, but before the project started, before the partners start sharing any more critical and sensitive information, we have worked out an arrangement and understanding with the student so they know that the code cannot be shared outside, and in many cases, the students agree with it. They understand. They treat it mostly like an internship where they've done the work. They can claim that they've done such project, but they won't be kind of publishing the code or anything online. With that said, I'll pause for a minute in case anybody has any questions about any of the things that we've talked so far. If you have any questions, you can either unmute yourself or again, throw in the chat so I can answer that for you.
Hi, yes, David. I have a question. So you mentioned about the hosting. So can the student actually set up the hosting environment, or we have to set it up for them to deploy?
In many cases, what we ask the students is to deploy it on an instance, and they usually deploy on Heroku, if you know what that is, or AWS in some cases. So you will have an account running, you will have a server running your project. However, when they do that, they use student accounts, which could be free in many cases. But after the project is done, they're not going to be taking ownership of that. So now you are in a way, an organization or an individual owning that server and may be required to pay somewhere between like $10 a month to $20, $30 a month to keep that server running. But in most cases, where applicable, the students will deploy to one cloud hosting if that works.
Okay, thank you.
There's a question about the timeline. I will get to that in a bit, but overall is that the deadline to submit the proposals is May 8th. And usually the way it works is that we're going to filter through the proposals, find the ones that are a good fit for the program, and share them with the students. That would take about a week or two. And by the end of May, you're going to have heard from us whether your project has been matched, meaning that the qualified student team has chosen to work on your project, or whether it has not been matched. And by the end of May, you're going to be have been scheduled to meet with the students first, and then the rest of it is you work with the students. There's one iteration that happens, let's say by the end of June, and you have July to work out the details of it, and early August is when the project is handed off to the partner. There's a question about where if we have a product that needs the IP to be owned by the company, it sounds like this isn't the right option. Is that correct? Depends how you want to define it. A lot of the times, so at the end of the project, students will release their work as an open source IP to anyone who is interested in working on it. Now, if you want to limit it to yourself, they can open source it to you, meaning that it's an open source project. You can take ownership of it and you can do whatever you want with it, which means you can develop your own IP with it. Now, if you want to make sure that you are the only person who have access to it, that's something that you communicate with the students, and they will honor that if you work with them. So now it's an open source project, and you can build on top of it. You can add your own IP and take ownership of that IP. It is an MIT license, which is very, very generous in terms of what the licensees can do with it. It happens all the time. Half of the software in the world, well, I don't know about the half, but the good number of software in the world is running through open source projects. So I wouldn't see that as a key limitation. But again, I'm happy to talk more about it if you have a very specific case. There's another question, speaking on Heroku or AWS, do we set up that arrangement with the vendor directly, or do the students set that as part of the process and then transfer the instance license to us? So we require the students to deploy their project to whatever hosting service that you want to use. Well, whatever hosting service that either they choose or you choose, or you work together to choose, right? They set it up on their own student accounts, or if you have your own account, they can set it up on your own account, given that you can give them access in a timely manner. And after that, you can take ownership of that account, you can take ownership of that instance. So this is something that we work out case by case because every partner is different and every project is different. But usually in the past few terms, we've been able to kind of work out the details. So the handoff is more, much more streamlined and straightforward. Any other questions about the IP, the deployment, the handoff? That is a great question, Sarah. Thank you. How many projects are we looking to build? So this term, because of all the COVID situations, we have a last minute change of plans where we have a small, as of now, we have a smaller team. So I think realistically, we're going to be looking at about 6 to 8 projects. And in the winter, we had about 60 proposals, of which about, I think, 40 something were qualified, and we could only choose 20 of them. So roughly about a third of the projects were accepted. This term, we're looking at 6 to 8, and we may have around, realistic looking, 40 to 50 proposals coming in. So again, a third of chance of proposals being accepted. I will talk about what would make a proposal interesting for the students and help you with the odds of kind of being successfully matched with a student team at the end if I don't talk about it down the line. So let's say you submitted your proposal and everything, your proposal was qualified and we put it out there for the students to choose from, and the students chose it. They are qualified as a team to work on your proposal. What happens next? The TA will send out an introductory email saying, congratulations, you were matched together, and please meet online. Obviously now before it used to be in person, now it will have to be online. You're gonna be arranging to meet with the students to talk about communication challenge and frequency. So you both come to an agreement to hold each other accountable to, let's say, be responsive within a day or two or however you wanna make it work. You talk about scope of the project. A lot of our partners have no technical background, which means they have no understanding of what is possible. And the students and the TA will work with you to kind of try to scope and prioritize. If you want 20 things built, we talk about what are the top 5 things that need to be built. We hash it out, and the students are taught to work with you to kind of figure out what are the most important things that need to be done. And the scoping and prioritization is done as part of the first meeting. And you also talk about your IP requirements, your confidentiality, your deployment, and your maintenance. If you have a technical developer to take it on after, which some of our partners do, all of those details are to be figured out before the work actually starts. Now, this is all the first meeting. This should happen, let's say, by the 3rd or 4th week of May. And by then, you both either agree on moving forward with the project, or you decide to not move forward with the project after talking through the details. And you will be put out there for another student team to pick up, which unfortunately, realistically, I think it won't happen for the summer because of the limited number of students that we have. And the students will have the option to choose another partner to work with. There's a question about the type of projects that the students are more interested in. I'll talk about that after I talk about how the flow of the project works over line. So I talked about timeline before. Now let's take a look at it a little bit more deeper. Proposal submissions, we mentioned May 8th, and the selection period. Again, this is a period where the students choose what projects to work on. And it includes your initial call that I just talked about. And we have 3 main deliverables. The first deliverable is mostly kind of saying this is the scope that we agreed to, and the partner knows that we're going to only do this much of the project. In some cases, we've had in the past where the partner's idea of what could be done was much, much smaller than what the students could do. And we have to expand the project to make it worthwhile for our course. So both ends of the spectrum exist in our past experience. So by early June, we know what is to be built. By let's say late June or early July, there will be a first version that you can look at. It will not be very likely what you're looking for, but it will start looking like what you had in mind. It will have the basic functionalities and features, and then you can give the students feedback. You are at this point working and seeing potentially every single week, and giving the feedback and seeing iterations and iterating through that. So you see multiple iterations of the project by the time it comes to late July. In the past term, what we have done is we invite the partner to join the final presentation of the students. If you've seen a video online, you may have noticed that other than the instructor, the partner may be present on the presentation as well. So at this point, the students will say what is the problem they worked on and what is the solution they built, and they demo their solution, mostly to the instructor, because at this point, the partner has already seen it so many times. And at the end of it, based on the feedback from the instructor, keeping in mind things like privacy and security and all those things, and feedback from the partner for things that are still missing, but need to be part of the project, there will be a final deliverable at the end where those final comments from the instructor and the partner are kind of applied. There are handoff documentation, so the partner can take it on and pass it on to another developer, or even if they choose to continue the project, obviously with a different team in the fall, they know they can hand it off to the developers coming on, take it on after the fall, right? So this final version would be done by early to mid-August. All of the dates are obviously to be confirmed and might be adjusted by potentially a week or two, depending on how things go. But that's kind of the rough idea of the timelines. Any questions about the timeline before I move on? Okay, let me take another question. Okay, so there's a question about during development, is there any specific project methodology to be followed? Who will be managing the project? That's a great question, Eduardo. So the TAs will be keeping an eye on the project. So the TA will be serving as a mentor and a team lead for the students to make sure that they're on the right track. Our TAs have done this a few times, so they've seen quite several examples of what happens in a project, and they also have professional experience in industry, so they can lead that. The methodology that we choose is a variation of Agile. If you know what Agile is, it could be Kanban, it could be Scrum, it could be anything that the students deem feasible. And the most important thing for our partners, especially non-technical partners, to know is that the important factor is the communication and how you engage with each other, which is to be decided by the partners and the student teams in the first meeting. So we don't prescribe any specific methodology. We focus more on practicality of making this partnership work. And you and the students are trusted with choosing the best way to happen. Obviously, we teach the students what would work and what are the options that they have, and the TAs are there to guide you, but nothing is prescribed to them to be followed exactly. Are there any other associated costs aside from the $20-30 for the server? Thanks. So cost of the server I mentioned, again, depending on the usage, the size, the provider that you use, there will be, potentially there could be other costs like buying domains or any other costs that you may have to run a website essentially. Those are some minimal costs that might be going on. If you choose to, let's say, plug into an API, again, I'm maybe talking too technicals for some non-technical people, but if you choose to use another service that is not offered for free, then if you want to continue using that, you may need to pay for it. But other than the server, which I think is the most important and constant cost, I think the rest of it would be more of an ad hoc thing, and you would know as you move forward with the project. Can we bring in a machine learning expert to work with the students to bring the product to fruition? Yes, you can bring in any kind of expert from any domain that you think helps the students. But we need to keep in mind that the students don't need to become experts in that field. So if you bring in, let's say in this case, a machine learning expert who provides them with insights and APIs and documentation and functions to kind of work with, that is totally fine. That's part of the students building a software for a specific domain. Now that domain could be machine learning, that domain could be nursing, that domain could be radiation technology, anything. That is totally fine. We've had environmentalists working with us. We've had restaurant businesses working with us. We've had all kinds of different kind of industries and domains working with us. And obviously they will need to bring in their domain expertise. As long as the students don't need to become an expert in that field and they just can work with the experts to build the software, that is totally within the bounds of the course. Do the students work on coding part only, or could they also be able to help with some of the designs? Technically, the requirements of the course are mostly on the coding part and usability, meaning that the product is something that a user can understand and work with. Design, if we're thinking about aesthetics, if we're thinking about creativity of design, that may not be falling under the realm of the course. However, in a team of 6 or 7, there's likely going to be one person who has an eye for those kinds of things and may work with you. And in the past, we've had a side benefit that I've heard from many partners, especially early stage partners working on a social venture or a startup, is that the students contribute a lot more than just the code. With asking the right questions, with guiding or proposing some ideas that the partner didn't think about. And those are what I call side benefits that for the most part are inevitable to a partnership like this. But what we require from the students is making a product that works. And all of these things could be part of it. Can we choose the programming language / platform? Yes, you can. In some cases, we have partners who have an existing platform. It may be done in PHP, it may be done in Python, it may be done in Node, in any technology. If that is the case, please specify it in your proposal so the students know what they're getting into. In the past, we have had a partner who had a PHP website. Again, this is an example just came to me. And we didn't know about it. We thought we were going to be building from scratch. And after the matching was done, as part of that first meeting, it came up and the students decided, no, we don't want to work on this project because of the limitations that potentially offers. But if you have an existing technology, platform, product, in many cases, it would be interesting for students because they want to work with an existing solution because that is what real life is like for most of them, right? So you can choose them, but please specify them if you have something specific in mind. Okay, good. Thank you so much for asking all those questions. Very helpful and hope it clarifies some of them for you. If there's anything else, please, again, keep them coming and I'm gonna go through the rest of the slides that I have prepared and I'll leave again time for any questions or any other thing at the end of it all. Okay, so we talked about the timeline. So I think I covered most of these things. Just might be worthwhile for another reminder that after the course is done, there may still be bugs. The projects may not still be fully finished. And again, depending on the project, depending on your organization, the students may volunteer to help. 1 or 2 of the students may volunteer to help you with the project. And so that means sometimes we've had partners who offered volunteer roles, contract roles for the students, part-time contract roles for them. And they've kind of made it work. And a lot of, a few times as well, we've had partners who submit another proposal to join the next term to continue the work. But it is very, very beneficial if you have a technical person who can take this product and software or code and continue working with it on a full-time or on a continuous basis, because the students, again, are committed to the 4-month time. So what do we do as part of the teaching team? So like I said, we are industry experts who are working in these spaces and we make sure that the TAs who are helping us have experience with such projects, or at least have experience the leading teams. So that's something that we do our best to kind of mimic the practical environment of the industry as much as possible. We are not coding ourselves, obviously, because it's the students who are doing that, but we serve as mentors and guides and facilitators, especially when there's a misunderstanding or a disagreement between the partner and the student team in terms of anything that may be happening. That's when I would personally be involved to kind of figure out and find a path forward. Fortunately, we haven't had to do that in the past. I remember for a fact that it didn't happen in winter with 22 teams, and I don't remember anything happening in the fall either. But usually the way it works is that the partners and the student teams are trusted to be able to build a mutually beneficial partnership together and move forward. If there are any situations where things are not as expected, the TAs get involved more, and if, again, it needs to be escalated, I'm happy to jump in and help out to make sure that we have a path forward. My personal philosophy is always find a path forward, regardless of how we ended up here, because looking back will help us learn, but it will not help us too much solve the problem. So like I said, we haven't had that situation in the past term, and hopefully it will not happen, but something to keep in mind. Another thing is we've had TAs who volunteer to even help even more, because a lot of our partners are nonprofits working in the GTA or even globally, and they are helping and volunteering their time for that good cause that the partners offer. And students and the TAs have weekly tutorials where they meet together, they sync up, and it is very, very beneficial if the partners are in constant contact with the TA as well, just to make sure that we're all moving forward and we are all on the same page as to where the project is going. Okay, so that was all the things that I have prepared. If you have any questions, by all means, please ask them here, and I'm happy to answer them. If you have a specific use case you're thinking about, I have this project in mind, I don't know if it qualifies or not, I'm happy to talk through those as well. And if you think you want to have email me and ask me a question, please use that email to send me the question. And I'm available to answer any questions you may have now. Thank you so much for paying attention. Thank you so much for joining the webinar, and hope to get your proposals coming in the next week or so. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions if you have anything that you're more comfortable asking via microphone. Oh, thank you, Mai. That was a good question and a reminder to something that I said I will talk about. What are some of the best types of projects that we have had in the past? These are something that are very, very special to use case that didn't exist before. For example, we've done a project for sick kids where we had to build a mobile app to help them kind of record an audio of something and send it out to a server for analysis, right? So it's a very specific use case, communication that is laid out. That's one. It was a mobile app. Generally, students respond very well if there's a positive cause attached to the project. So Feeding Canadian Kids is a partner that came back a few times, and obviously what they do is get the food from the restaurants and places where they don't have use for it, and then distribute the food to the kids who don't have access to food on a regular basis, right? So if you can put that kind of a positive, good human nature spin, for lack of a better word, to your project, it would be something that the students will welcome with much more kind of eagerness. Okay. Eduardo has a question about what is the level of detail you're expecting to receive, main concept and results, or something well structured as functional specs. So what we are hoping to receive from you is that you know what you're looking for, right? So we've had very early stage idea stage founders where still needed to kind of hash out what needs to be built. So we don't want to be very vague and high level to start, but we also don't want you to spec out the project for the students. Speaking out of the project, understanding the requirements is part of the project that the students will work on. It's part of the expectations and requirements, right? So we have some examples of what we expect on the document that I've shared. You want to be able to say, as a user, as a, let's say, administrator, as a restaurant owner, I want to be able to put up my meals, for example, every night. That's kind of like a high level that we want. And the students will work with you to kind of figure out the details and understand what exactly needs to be done, for that to happen, right? So generally what we say, it's kind of a user story format. As a user, like type of the role that you have, I mentioned restaurant owner. I want to be able to put up my food for donation. That exactly gives me a sense of what needs to be happening, and kind of helps the students understand what's going on. At that level to start will be good enough. Now, if you have more designs, as to you've already thought of wireframes and mock-ups and all those things, please include them there, because it will help the students understand what you have in mind, and it will kind of help them advance the project a little bit more. Hope that answers that question. Sarah is asking about proposal template. We have one proposal template that I've shared on the document, where I think you found this, the link to this webinar. I think that's still a good one where you can refer to that. And if you look at our proposal format, we guide you through some examples with some more specific questions. So if you can answer those for us, that will be very helpful. And I think that will guide you through thinking through the whole proposal as well. My suggestion is that if you want to take a look at the the form that we've put together first, and then take down the questions and then think about them for a few days and then come back and answer them, that might be a good way to go about it as well. Jake has a great question. Do the projects need to be a standalone application, or could they build out a major feature or an update of an existing platform? For most of our projects have been standalone. The biggest reason around that is getting access in time, meaning that if you want to the students want to work as part of a bigger project, that means they have to understand what else is involved, the other team, the ownership of that code, get access to it, be able to write to it, be able to deploy as part of that project. That introduces complexities that we haven't been able to do in the past in a timely manner, mostly because partners need to work through a whole lot of access details, for lack of a better word, on their own end. So that might be something to keep in mind. Still qualifies technically, because again, that's the reality of software, but we will have to work through that use case together to make sure that that's something that may be possible. But again, the biggest issue there is access and collaboration with the team that is working on it. If you have another system that the students need to integrate with, like through an API, through a file, some of those things, that is totally within the bounds of the course. And I personally think that's a great experience for the students and would encourage them to take that. But if they're going into an already existing software and starting to work on it, that might be a little bit more challenging. Okay. Okay, there's one more question that is very specific to a use case. I will hold off on answering that in case anyone else has any more generic questions. Okay. There's a private question about, I'll reach out to you if there are questions about while completing the proposal. I would suggest maybe asking your questions now here so everyone else can benefit as well. If not, I've left my email to answer your questions. Given that the course is about to start, I may not be able to give too many helpful and detailed answers just yet, or in a timely manner, but please feel free to reach out and I will do my best to at least guide you in the right path with your questions. Jake has a great question. Are there any value adds that we can provide as partners that could make this an exceptional experience for students, like access to mentors, providing references? The biggest thing that I think students look for from this experience is that feeling of accomplishment, that they've contributed to something meaningful. So that's the one thing that I've noticed a lot of the times. They're looking for something that has some kind of a cause behind it. So that's inherent in the project for most of, or many of our partners. A lot of the times the students also look for kind of that mentorship, that kind of someone who can help them with. So we've had a few partners who are PhD students from our own department, like the Vector Institute partnership that we've had was another PhD in computer science who was able to kind of help them with thinking through the problem. So think of it from the perspective of a student. They want to choose a project. They will be choosing the projects that, again, has that good cause, has potential to help them with their career. So if you can, obviously being part of a brand organization would be a valuable thing for the students. Again, I'm talking from the perspective of a student. References and mentorship will be also another value add that they will be having in mind. At the end, also giving them the freedom to express themselves and build the software. So being a collaborative partner and showing that is something that they definitely appreciate throughout the project as well. There is one question, and I almost get it every term when we offer this, where there's an idea for some kind of a platform to develop some kind of a community of sorts. And a lot of the times that community may be very specific to the niche that you have in mind. But keep in mind that although the community may be niche, the functionality that you're looking for in that community may not be niche. So look at community building platforms, and there are so many of them out there that can help you get started. I do my best to discourage the partners from going the path of building a custom community platform, mostly because I know there's already something out there, and I know they can solve their problems, not by having students kind of build something from scratch and kind of figuring out all the details. But there's already something out there that works, that is being maintained. There's a community around it, there's support, and many of them are very affordable. So that might be a path that I would recommend if you're thinking of building that kind of a community. If you're thinking about some specific functionality within that community, that might be something that we can talk about. But the overall kind of idea of building a community, there are many platforms that can help you get there much, much faster than working with a student team for 4 months to get something that you can kind of rely on you starting to use. And keep in mind, like from a social entrepreneur or an entrepreneur perspective, if you're not in the business of technology, you probably don't want to own that technology or work on it, right? So outsourcing might be the best thing. But again, that's just kind of like a rough, high-level guidance, and I'm happy to talk to any of you or go through the proposals as you submit them. Great, thank you so much, Alex. I appreciate that comment. I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to be here for another 10 minutes or so. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. If you need to jump off, by all means, go for it. Thank you so much for attending, and hope to hear or get your proposals shortly.
Thank you for the presentation. We'll keep in touch.
My pleasure. Thank you, Diana.
Bye.
And thank you, Mai, Sarah, and Eduardo. Appreciate it.